Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. Hope you enjoy. Story number 1. Humans Holding the Line, written by Flaming Raven. My name is Grizax. I am a member of the Runan, a race of avian bipeds with no ability to fly. This, is not an easy story to tell. Many things were all happening so fast. It all seems like what is the words the Terrans use? Yes, a fever dream. It was during the Thuga Plague. Yes, it was on the wait, what was that? You don't know what the Thuga Plague is? Well, let me tell you then. The Thuga Plague, named after the first planet that fell to it, is a form of microbe that can absorb other living cells and replicate perfect copies. We don't know what triggers it, but at some point the host undergoes a horrifying mutation. There appears to be no standard for the mutation. It may be the Thuga host becomes a colonial organism after infection. Said infection may be carried out on a genetic level. Said infection occurs when the microorganism comes into contact with the victim's blood. Reports have been made about completely new creatures arising from the pools of blood. The only effective weapons against the plague appear to be fire, energy-based weapons, and a recent release of human technology, molecular destabilizers. All right, now that you've been informed of the Thuga Plague, it is time to begin. It was on the Terran planet Thermopylae, in the capital city, Ephialtes. The streets were chaos. Evacuation sites were being abandoned just as fast as they were set up. I was part of the relief effort of the Runan had sent to help the Terrans. We started with 4 million. 1 day later, we were now numbered at 12. I was defending an evacuation site that had stood the longest, Site Epsilon. I was surrounded by charred bodies of what were once people. Honest to God's living, breathing people. I stood alone against the shambling hordes of teeth and claws until I heard it. A familiar whir of Terran destabilizer, a blast of orange light, and the Thuga that was about to spew its stomach acid at me was naught but ash. This bought us time as the Thuga instinctively pulled back, away from the destabilizer. Looking to my left, I saw them, a group of Terrans. They were not soldiers, they were civilians. I looked to the evacuation shuttles to see that they had reached maximum capacity. Why aren't you trying to leave? Aren't you afraid of dying? I could not help but ask. The one who had fired the shot began to laugh. He then pointed to the shuttle closest to us, more specifically, to a woman holding what they could only be her daughter. You see those two? That's my sister. That's my niece. I'm not sure what kind of bonds your people have, but that's my blood right there, he said, stepping up to the barricade. I don't have anyone. No friends, no kids, hell. I'm still a virgin, so I know I don't have any lovers. He took a rifleman's stance, keeping his knee loose and his shoulders taut. The others began to point as well, to various people on the various shuttles. I was bewildered. Here I was, swindled into thinking that this would be a blue milk run, and these Terrans were willing to stay behind. If I were in their shoes, I would be throwing people out of those shuttles to squeeze myself in. They took up positions, and the shuttle's engines activated. The deafening hum pulled the Thuga from their hiding places. We had 1 hour until the shuttles could come back. I expected the Terrans to simply hold the line, be stoic in the face of death. I was wrong. I heard manic laughter from my left. Hell yeah, come and get some, you dead space rejects! You want a piece of me? Well, come get it! The Terrans were yelling. The Terran whom first spoke started singing, For the grace, for the might of our Lord, for the home of the holy, for the faith, for the way of the sword, gave their lives so boldly, for the grace, for the might of our Lord, in the name of his glory, for the faith, for the way of the sword, came to tell their story again. This drew out a genuine laughter from the other humans. Then one of the Terrans was hit by a spike made of the Runan's talon. Her arm immediately began to mutate. Her other hand shot out to grab an eviscerator grenade. She pulled the pin with her teeth, breaking a few, and yelled, "Witness me!" As she sprinted towards the horde of Thuga. I could only look onward in horror as the grenade detonated, turning all biological material in a 10-meter radius into pure carbon. I expected a wail of grief. Instead, the humans let out a roar of hatred. They started hurling more insults, and even a few brand new slurs at the inexorable horde. This went on, the Terrans going through their cycle of rage, hilarity, and spite. Never ending was the tide of teeth, viscera, and claws. Whenever a Terran was infected, they died, taking as many as they could with them. Eventually, it was just me and the first Terran. I heard the shuttle approaching, but so would the Thuga. I knew in that moment exactly what was going to happen. If we both ran, the Thuga would cut us down as we made for the shuttle. They would infect the pilot and fly it to where they could get more food. I refused to let that happen. I was a soldier of the meritocracy. These Terrans gave their lives just to get us to this point. I heard the shuttle land, and its doors opened. I was about to wave them off when I felt a blunt object slam into the side of my head. Sounds were muffled, my vision blurred, but a few words came through the fog. "Get him out of here," shouted the Terran. "I'll hold them off." "That's not an option. We're getting you both out," another voice shouted back. I heard a distant click of the eviscerator grenade. "I'm already infected." "Just get him out," the Terran shouted again. My vision cleared for about a moment. The Terran was standing upon a pile of eviscerator grenades. "Tell my family I love them," came his voice. For the first time it sounded broken, nothing like the spit and vinegar he had shown previously. Before the shuttle doors closed, I saw the Terran bathed in golden light. To this day, I owe Michael Hackett my life, and what a life it has been. It's been, well, 85 years since that day, and ever since that day, I've been living my life as best I could, trying every day to honor the sacrifices those Terrans made. Caden Bennett, 32. Ishwari Namgala, 40. James Royce, 65. Kimberly Hale, 29. Stephen Garcia, 51. Tavian Freeman, 28. And Michael Hackett, 22. There is a monument to the fallen of Thermopylae, inscribed below the names of the fallen of 4 words, per aspera ad astra. For those who have not studied ancient human languages, it translates as follows: through hardship to the stars. End of story. Story number 2. Small, fragile, and destined to die. Written by In Babylon They Wept. Aaron could feel the lich standing over him. He was bleeding head face down in the mud, too weak to roll over, too weak to even spit. But no cage of dying flesh could contain the hate he felt for the creature looming above him. He felt a clawed hand on his back, surprisingly gentle, as it flipped him over. He almost wished it hadn't. Seeing the light of his final sunset was glorious. But there was a moment where he'd seen under the creature's hood, seen the void that cast a shadow of darkness itself. He'd always heard there was a skeleton under those rags. The truth was so much worse. That same hand, still soaked in his blood, reached for him again, and so he tensed. Bloody froth forced from his lips by the effort. It was just as gentle as it was the first time, however, cradling his head so that he could watch the sunset without having to strain his eyes. It was disconcerting. He wanted to ask why he was doing this, but he couldn't manage the effort. The creature seemed to sense his concerns, and he felt a tendril of its inhuman consciousness brush against his own. "I don't hate you," he reeled. Even at its most gentle, the mind of the horror holding him could crush him by accident. He felt like a field snake next to a leviathan, a stone next to a mountain. He tried to shield his mind from the presence, but its words hammered down implacably. "I pity you. Small, fragile, destined to die. If you were lucky, it would have been in your bed. Instead, it is here. On behalf of a king that will never bother to learn your name. The most you had to look forward to was a life of toil in the fields. You didn't even get a quick end at the hands of my servants. Bleeding out face down in the mud was your lot in life. There was a pause before the creature continued. Its inner voice changed from sympathetic to cold. You were a mere man sent to stand before an army of monsters. How could I not pity you? Misery ripped through him. He'd howled it in his whole life, bracing himself for the Lich's inevitable return. But those final words tore his walls down. He felt like he was drowning in helplessness, choking on his own despair. Then the despair ignited. He spat in the Lich's face. The effort of it almost killed him, his vision blackening at the corners, his muscles burning like he'd been set on fire. The Lich recoiled and he could feel the defenses of its ancient consciousness waver. It was the only chance he would ever have, and he took it, ramming his mind into the psychic wall of the Lich with all of the force of his soul. He couldn't tell who was more surprised to feel the wall give in, him or the Lich. There has never been a time I didn't fear you, monster. Stories have been passed down through generations about how unstoppable you are, how no grave can hold you, how every time you are defeated you simply rise again. But I never realized what they truly revealed, how many times you've been stopped. I am a mere man sent to battle an army of monsters. I am a small and fragile thing, destined to die. But it is men like me, small and fragile, that have killed you throughout the ages. You will meet your end, and the plowman's spear, a fisherman's trident, a harvestman's scythe, again and again, as many times as it takes. And when the stars burn to ash, and this world is nothing but ice and ruin, you will find no refuge in heaven or hell, because both will be full of men like me that you sent there, men that you trained to hold the line. You will learn to hate me, creature. I swear it. The Lich sat in stunned silence at the end of Aaron's rebuke. Fury dripped from it like a snow melt from a glacier, colder than freezing, colder than death. Its pinprick points of light met Aaron's brown eyes, but he still refused to look away. It was closer to death than life, but he still blazed with defiance. The hand that had been gentle, cradling his head, clenched into a fist, crushing Aaron's skull like a rotten tomato. With nothing else to do, the Lich stood up, taking a moment to wipe the spit off his face before shaking his hands free of the blood and bone that had once been a human head. Then it stalked back to its war camp. It had planning to do, and for the first time in centuries, it felt strangely unsure. End of story. I would just quickly like to thank the T5 channel members and patrons: Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Barkey, It's Difficult to Pronounce, Lord Azrakul, and Arcadian.